Nobody ever tells you what it actually feels like from the inside. They describe the behavior. They list the patterns. They hand you the signs and the symptoms and the checklists. But the actual lived texture of it, what it feels like to wake up every single day with a mind that was quietly shaped by both pain and extraordinary perception, that part almost never gets spoken about honestly. That is exactly where we are going today. Not the checklist, not the solution, not the clinical language that keeps everything at a comfortable distance. Just the raw, quiet, remarkably specific inner experience of what it actually feels like to carry traumatic intelligence from the inside. Traumatic intelligence, the heightened awareness, the deep pattern recognition, the emotional acuity that develops when a mind learns to survive difficult early experiences, leaves a very particular fingerprint, not just on how a person thinks, on how they feel, on how the world lands on them differently than it lands on everyone else, how ordinary moments carry extra weight, how silence speaks at full volume, how being in a room full of people can feel like reading an entire library at once. This is what that experience actually feels like from the inside. The room is always louder than it looks. Walk into any social situation with traumatic intelligence, and something happens almost immediately. The brain begins processing on multiple frequencies at the same time. The words being said, the words being carefully avoided, the micro-expression that crossed someone's face for half a second before they composed it back into neutral, the slight shift in energy when two people with unspoken tension enter the same space. The thing nobody said but everyone felt, neuroscientists call this hypervigilant sensory processing. A state where the amygdala, the brain's threat detection center, has been trained through early experience to read environments with extraordinary sensitivity. Originally a survival tool, now a permanent feature of how the world is received. From the inside, it feels like this. Every room has a subtext. Every conversation has a layer underneath it, and you are always reading both simultaneously while nobody around you knows you are doing it. It is exhausting in a way that is almost impossible to explain, not because something is wrong, but because the volume of information never fully lowers. You don't get a quiet channel. You get everything, all at once, all the time. I knew something was off before I had words for it. There is a particular quality to traumatic intelligence that sets it apart from other kinds of perceptiveness. It almost always arrives as a felt sense before it arrives as a thought. Something feels wrong before the mind can explain why. A situation feels unsafe before any specific incident has occurred. A decision feels misaligned before the logical argument against it has fully formed. Psychologist Antonio Damasio's research on somatic markers, the way the body stores emotional memory and communicates it back to the brain, helps explain what's happening. When a mind has spent years learning to survive by reading subtle signals, the body becomes its own early warning system. The gut tightens, the chest closes slightly, the breath changes. And you already know, even though you can't yet prove it, from the inside, this feels like living with a compass that is extraordinarily accurate but completely impossible to explain to anyone else. You just know, and the knowing arrives before it can be justified. The strange part, the part that almost nobody talks about, is that you are right far more often than feels comfortable to admit. Stillness feels like a room I can visit, but never fully live in. Here is something that people with traumatic intelligence almost never say out loud. Genuine quiet is uncomfortable, not because they don't want peace. They want it more than most people understand. But a mind forged in environments where stillness sometimes came right before disruption has learned to treat calm with cautious suspicion. The nervous system doesn't fully believe that peaceful moments are safe to settle into. Researchers describe this as a dysregulated baseline. A nervous system so accustomed to a certain level of alertness that genuine rest registers as unfamiliar rather than welcome. From the inside, it feels exactly
I think
like
we should
this.
reconsider
You
our
finally have
approach.
a quiet
But what
evening.
about the
Nothing is
risks?
wrong.
We'll address
Everything is
them one
fine.
by one.
And somewhere just underneath the surface, the mind is still scanning, still waiting, still wondering what it missed. Not anxiously, exactly, just watchfully, as if peace is something you are allowed to stand near, but not yet allowed to fully inhabit. If that feeling is familiar to you, you understand something important about what traumatic intelligence actually costs. Not in dramatic ways, in quiet, daily, almost imperceptible ways that accumulate over years. I feel things in slow motion and fast forward at the same time. One of the most specific and least described experiences of traumatic intelligence is a particular relationship with emotional time. Something happens, a conflict, a disappointment, an unexpected kindness. And the emotional response is often delayed. The mind engages first, processes first, analyzes first, and the feeling arrives later, sometimes hours afterward, sometimes in the silence before sleep when there's nowhere left to put it. But once it arrives completely, with a depth and a weight that can feel disproportionate to whatever triggered it. This is not instability. Psychologists who study emotion regulation in trauma-adapted
I have a gut feeling about
individuals
this.
describe this
My stomach
as
is
a
telling me
two-phase
something.
processing
I should
pattern.
trust it. Why do I
Cognitive
feel so
containment
lost?
in the moment, followed
I need
by
to
deep
face my
feeling and
fears.
safety. The
Maybe
mind
there's
holds
hope.
it together while it has to. And then, when the door closes and the performance is over, everything that was held finally moves. From the inside, it feels like emotional time runs on a completely different clock than everyone else's. Like you are always slightly out of sync with the present moment. Processing the last thing while living the current one. Feeling yesterday while navigating today. It is disorienting in small ways that nobody sees, but that quietly accumulate over a lifetime. My depth is the most beautiful and the
why
most
now?
isolating thing about me.
Come on,
There is
relax.
a paradox at the center of traumatic intelligence that almost everyone who carries it has felt but rarely said aloud. The very thing that makes them most perceptive also makes them most difficult to fully reach. The depth of processing, the layered thinking, the ability to hold complexity, to see nuance where others see simplicity.
It's too dangerous.
To understand motivations
But you
that were
promised
never
we'd
spoken,
stick
and
together.
feelings
I
that were
know,
never
but it's
named.
too risky.
These are extraordinary capacities.
So many thoughts
but
tonight.
they also mean that genuine
Writing
mutual
them down
understanding,
helps.
the kind where another person's inner world actually meets yours, is rare. Not impossible, but rare enough that when it happens, it feels quietly significant in a way that is hard to put into words. Research in interpersonal neurobiology, particularly the work of Daniel Siegel, describes resonance, the experience of being
He's
truly
walking
seen
by
by another
again.
person,
I
as one of the
wonder where
deepest
he's
human needs.
going.
For those with traumatic intelligence, the bar for resonance is simply higher, because the inner world is simply more layered.
I feel so
Most
distant even
conversations
sitting
skim
here.
the surface of a
I'm right
depth
here.
that has no
What's
bottom,
wrong?
and
I
you
don't
feel the
know.
gap every time. From the inside, this feels like standing in a room with a very large window. You can see everything clearly. You can describe what you see with remarkable precision. But the glass between you and the landscape is always there. Beautiful and just slightly separate. This is what it actually feels like from the inside. A room that is always louder than it looks. A compass that knows before the mind can explain. A nervous system that has learned to visit peace without fully trusting it. An emotional clock that runs on its own quiet schedule. And a depth so specific that true resonance, when it finally arrives, feels like something close to extraordinary. Traumatic intelligence is not a diagnosis. It is not a limitation. It is not something to be fixed or managed or reduced to a list of symptoms.
I think we should
It is a
reconsider our
particular
approach.
way of being in
But
the
what
world,
about the risks?
forged in
We'll address
difficulty,
them one by one.
expressed in perception, carried in ways that rarely have simple names. And perhaps the most important thing to understand about it is this. The inner experience of it is not a problem to be solved. It is a landscape to be understood, because understanding how your own mind actually works, not from the outside, not through someone else's checklist, but from the inside, is where something genuinely, quietly, permanently changes.